So thank you, Dave, for doing that. Dave is, I know Dave through something called the Being Movement. We both are part of that movement, and he is a master of acknowledgement. He creates the people in his world through acknowledging them. And we're going to dive in today, really looking at the identity of men through their masculinity. So welcome, Dave. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to throw it open to you to just tell us a little bit about who you are.
Wonderful. Thank you. You know, I am so grateful to be here with you. That's who I am in this moment. Because Fiona Ross is the Queen of Kings. For me, she is a powerhouse that allows and creates things to happen by agreement. And I, we've only had a little bit of face-to-face interaction, and I loved every second of it. And since then, we've had a little bit more interaction, and I've cherished and relished every second of that because I know who you are now, and who you are for me is this empowering person who knows how to bring energy and aliveness to the situations that would seem mundane or annoying or difficult. You are someone who works miracles in the world of making stuff happen that wasn't going to happen anyway. And I so love that about you, Fiona. I just so love that about you.
And thank you, Dave. And what a beautiful example of how you create through acknowledgement. Right there, you just jump straight in. I don't even know if you know you do it, but you jump straight into acknowledging the people around you, and that's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. It does help that I'm surrounded by beautiful people, but that is intentional too, by the way. The reason that I wanted to be on this show with you was because I saw how you are bringing forth the conversations that really matter. And I have a conversation around that, something that matters to me, that shows up for me as really something that I can contribute with my experience. And so who I am now is different from who I was. You see, growing up, I had a path that was prescribed to me, a path of being that I didn't realize was a path of being. It was a cultural set of agreements and burdens that I unconsciously bought into. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, the culture that I have, the culture that had me originally, is very empowering and calls forth greatness, which is fantastic until it becomes a burden or until it becomes untenable, or until it's suddenly gone and I have to figure out who the hell I am in this world that doesn't make any sense anymore. So the short version of who I am is I am loving, I am caring, and I am serving, and I am inspired.
Yeah.
That's who I am. And my name is Dave Orton. I come from a rural part of Idaho, which is a rural part of the United States of America. I have worked in the farms and fields. And what I'd like to share with you is not so much the origin story, if you will, of all that, but it is very much in the world of what I thought I was supposed to do and how I did it, and when it fell apart and I had to figure out where to go from there. So what I'd like to refer to this persona that I took on, this identity that I created, is the $20 million man. You know, when we were growing up, there was this show called The $6 Million Man. Do you remember that one?
You built him. What was his name? Steve. I had such a $6 million man. I can't tell you.
I know. There's there's young people on this watching this show that are like, what the heck is that? It's like, look it up if you're really interested. It doesn't matter. But I was the $20 million man. And what that meant was that in my 15-year career in technology, leadership in technology, I made the company that I worked for $20 million
Wow.
at a very healthy, robust margin. And it wasn't just me; it was the teams that I managed, the programs that I managed. But I was the key. I was the one that did the stuff, you know. and I related to myself as that. Now, from the perspective of the culture that I have, that was very empowering. Globetrotting, you know, family man, have the wife, the kids, well compensated for my work. You know, and curious as all get out. Got to go have conversations with people. I'm the person that if you're private and quiet, you do not want to sit next to me on the airplane because I will talk to you. You know, if I was in Britain, I'd be from Newcastle, I think, something like that. And
Yeah.
I loved it. So I'd go to Dubai and talk with people from Dubai. I'd go to Singapore and talk with people from Bangladesh and all these other countries, these melting pot spaces where I got to be. And that was so meaningful to me.
So you gained a lot of significance from you gained a lot of significance as a person through how you earned your money, what you did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and who wouldn't want to be friends with $20 million man, right?
Right.
I mean, I would.
Yeah. But that's not who you were underneath that persona that was created.
That's correct. You're absolutely correct. And I lost sight of that, Fiona.
Yeah.
I lost sight of that. And that came into focus when almost 15 years after I started working with that company, things slowed down and they immediately let me go. And I was... Say that again?
Who were you then when the day they let you go? What happened? Who like...
Woo! I was devastated. I was
Right.
devastated. I suddenly became a victim of this I became a victim of this idea that I had, a victim of this identity that I'd created, because if I was no longer a $20 million man, and if just one decision from this company that I had been very loyal to could throw me off and throw me out of that, I didn't know who I was. And I thought, now this was interesting. It wasn't immediate. So it wasn't just that day and bam, I was, oh. I thought, well, I'm a $20 million man. I can go find another place where I can contribute and have the lifestyle that I'm accustomed to. And I couldn't. I didn't find work for a year and a half, steady work. You know, I was coaching during that time, but it was part-time.
Yeah.
And $1,000 a month doesn't go very far.
No.
You know, so
certainly not if you're used to having
10,
a high reward.
10 to 12, 15, whatever it was. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so that started to strip away, and I started to go into this quiet desperation, and then the quiet desperation turned into a loud desperation. I realized that the urge to be self-sufficient, the expectations that I had taken upon myself as part of the culture in which I grew up, and it were a very much a burden in the absence of producing.
Oh, interesting. The absence of producing. So is that, I remember watching an amazing TED talk by a man called Ken Robinson. He researched education. He was an educator, and he does this amazing TED talk where he talks about how our education system is kind of built on a factory model, whereby these little creative creatures are fed in one end, and then they're produced they come out as products. And how what the system does is it actually shapes them. And so when one of the examples he gives is he says there's two groups of people, and they're both given a paperclip and asked to write down or come up with as many things that you could do with a paperclip. And the first group come up with like 5 or 6, and they're the adults. And the second group are the kids, and they come up with like 50 really easily, because they're not constrained by, well, what if it was a 20-foot paperclip? You know, their imaginations are so huge. And how when we pop these little children in one end of our education system, we polish off all those edges and go, no, don't be silly, a paperclip's only this big. No, it really is. It's only this big. And they come out the other end trimmed down and into a product. And so it's interesting that you said your identity was kind of based on what you could produce.
What you said is disturbing and rings true.
Yeah.
You know, and I did very well in school. You know, the cultural trappings of school are, if you're good at taking tests and you can write okay, then you will be rewarded and appreciated. And I was. So I came out ready to be a product, and ready to be ready to step in and be self-sufficient, and to provide for a family, and to work the years that I needed to work, and then do the things that were prescribed, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not all bad. It's actually, so it's easy to think, okay, well, this is a terrible thing. Yes, and for some of our kids, it is super valuable to learn how to be on task on something for a while, and to be able to create something that is difficult, and to learn how to do hard things.
Mm.
And for others, it is utter torture. You know, it is something that is being done to them. See, I embraced school. I was not a victim of school. School was my school. I made school my I don't want to say that word, but you know what I'm thinking here. It starts with a B and ends with like witch. and I made friends with teachers. I'm still, I mean, in the one of my favorite teachers of all time is a member of the Being Movement. and I love her. She was my German teacher, and oh my gosh, she was such a powerful influence for good in my life.
Mm. You know, and I'm not saying the education system is wrong, but I think there's an element in there when we talk about our state of being, of who we are. What if we could keep that alive? What if that was almost part of the curriculum, was to keep the essence of us glowing within us as we go through this incredible process of learning new and wonderful things, and how to show up in the world that we live in.
Oh, I'm right there with you. And we live in a generation and in a time, like my children, my son was one for whom school was just onerous. He just graduated, and we gave him 2 months off to, you know, he just recently started a job. And but he's like, I was like, this boy needs time to decompress after having had school done to him for those years. And
having school done to him.
Yeah. And in the face of that going on, we live in a time when the things that he really cared about, the things that he really wanted to do, he was able to go out onto YouTube and figure out how to do. He's produced fantastic music pieces that are in alignment with his soul and his exploration of being. He's not dependent on a job to know who he is. He knows who he is. He knows what he wants to do. And he's done it. And he started at age 13.
Isn't that fantastic?
It is fantastic. It's beautiful. And there's nothing keeping us from doing that too.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. So how this ties back into the conversation of identity and being is that when that job went away and I couldn't quickly replace it, and we spent all of our savings and we became dependent on, meaning my family and I became dependent on the assistance of family and government and church to meet the needs of our of living. That was very disruptive to me from the perspective of identity, because I was no longer, I had been giving my whole life. Part of my undistinguished agreement, expectation, whatever you want to call that, was that I was not one who received assistance. I was one who gave assistance. And I didn't have the channels for receiving open at all. And it was painful.
Yeah.
It was traumatic to receive charity. Are you kidding me? I give charity. I don't receive charity. What? Where the hell did that come from? That's bullshit.
So receiving with the grace that you give with wasn't easy to do.
It was utterly unavailable to me until I had no other choice, Fiona.
And then was there shame and all those kinds of emotions thrown in?
Yeah. And that's when I started to grieve. That's when the fact that I was not the $20 million man, that for all intents and purposes, I was bankrupt, and that identity was bankrupt. That was the bigger deal. Whatever my numbers in the bank were my numbers in the bank, and they were red. They were negative at that point. But the bigger realization and the more difficult thing to deal with was that I couldn't relate to myself like that anymore. That part of me died.
I'm getting a phoenix here, that and from the ashes arose
something amazing. Yes, thank you. And there was a period of about 18 months of, and actually it was even longer than that, dark night of the soul that was painful and hellish and deeply depressed. And I couldn't get myself out of bed some months. I mean, it was when getting out of bed and showering and making a phone call, and that's all I could muster for the day. There was some dark time. And this was interesting because this is when so Steve Hardison is kind of the person that brought us together, right?
Yeah.
This was when I went and was gifted by a family member 10 hours of time with Steve Hardison. And my goals were to, Steve, please fix me. Because in the midst of this, addictions came out as a way to escape from the pain of this grieving process, or this dark night of the soul. And then also, I was feeling really, really bad. I couldn't get a job because I wouldn't have hired me with the place I was coming from at that point.
I'm hearing Steve in my head Steve, please fix me. I'm hearing him saying, and you can be sure I will not be doing that.
And you would be right, Fiona. He did help me forgive myself for the judgments that I'd made about the requirements of being a man in Western culture.
Yeah, and so I need to throw in that he helped you. He didn't fix you. When you come from that, I'm a victim of circumstance. I'm a victim of they made me redundant. I'm a victim of this.
Mm-hmm.
Showing up with a victim mentality, wanting someone else to now come and fix you. It's all outside of yourself. It puts your power outside of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm hearing is Steve helped you bring that power back inside of yourself through forgiveness and
forgiveness,
learning
the long play of creating who I am, not who I thought I was.
Yeah.
The long play of not addressing these. It was so masterful, Fiona, how he worked with me was that he refused, not to my face, but he refused to be the one responsible for my coaching.
Mm.
Like, Dave, the power is all with you.
Yeah.
And I was not immediately convinced.
What am I paying you for then?
Right. I'm hurting now. Can you like give me an Advil or something, and then we can work on the hard stuff? But I'm so grateful for that, because the long play was the play where I created myself, and he gave the tools and reminded me of my greatness and acknowledged me as one of the ways that he created me was the most powerful mind that he had ever met in his life. And it was so, what I was explaining was at the time was this: right now I feel like I'm hot and cold, and I'm strong and weak, and I have no idea who I actually am. And I'm holding all these things in my mind at the same time. He's like, Dave, you've got to realize that a weak mind could not handle the amount of thrash that you're going through.
Right.
And so, yeah, he found this way to acknowledge me and create
And
me.
I'm curious because this, and I want to pose this question because I think this is quite, it would be quite interesting for some of the people listening who maybe have never had coaching or never invested in a coach. So here you are, you're down to receiving help from friends, church, state, and somebody gives you a significant amount of money and says to you, go spend this on coaching. Now, that significant amount of money, you were probably looking at going, man, I could feed my kids for a long time on this money. What made you, I know it possibly wasn't your choice because it was gifted to you as that, you need to go work with Steve Hardison. But accepting that somebody's giving you a significant amount of money to then go and spend with a coach, I can hear people in the, who might be watching this in the future going, I'm going to invest a large sum of money in a coach.
Yeah, it's not particularly logical from that old model, is it? No, definitely not. Now, here's the funny thing. It was a gift, and they did not say you need to go do this. I enrolled them into giving me that gift.
Right. Okay.
So my purpose was clear.
Coaching.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a Be With session with Steve 5-6 years previous.
Right.
And that had changed the vector of my life very powerfully. And I'm so grateful because it gave me Penny, my wife, a relationship and I that was real, as opposed to, me pretending that she was a certain way and that's who I was relating to as my story about her, instead of discovering who she is every day. That bringing us so close together, that me being transparent with her about the challenges in my life was something that was the reason that our marriage survived this difficult thing. That was what allowed me to go to her when I was having thoughts about, there's a $2 million life insurance policy. All I have to do is go out in the desert with my gun, and all of a sudden I've made my wife and children very wealthy. Hey, this is starting to look really good. But instead of hiding that, the relationship that I had with Penny was, hey, this thought's going on in my mind. And she's like, no, I want you.
Yeah.
I just want you.
Yeah.
Money's not important. We have family, we have friends, we have, we're going to be protected and supported, and I want you. And that's a miracle, Fiona, that
Yes.
I didn't see until looking back on it. This whole experience, this whole losing my identity was a miracle and a path that I had to go through to become the possibility of who I am now.
Mm.
And I'm so grateful for that, because I got to talk with Ankush Jain last night.
Mm.
And I got to talk with
Amazing.
Raghav yesterday. And I got to, I have these powerful, inspiring people that are not, that are not people that are like way, way, way above me anymore. They're people.
Yes.
They're masters, and I get to be a master among masters. I get to be a giant among giants. This was my path of going from a small to a giant. Now, wherever I am on that, no more pea soup thing.
Yeah.
This was the moment, and it was a long moment, but that was the moment where I became aware of a possible self that was created and not just a default already going to happen anyway based on the upbringing and the culture that I came from.
Mm. And I loved what you said earlier. I'm just going to wind back a little bit to something you said about how that first experience with Steve allowed you to see Penny for who she is and not who you were imagining her to be. And when I think of relationship, and we look at figures of divorce, and we look at how, I can just look at my own history. Those expectations that we can place upon other people, and then we're just disappointed when they don't live up to them, and they're just sitting there going, I never said I was going to be that. And so tell me a little bit more about how you were creating Penny in an expectation way, and then how you now create her through acknowledgement of who she is.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I love this question, because when I first met with Steve at that Be With session, the first thing he told me was, Dave, you're the most pretentious SOB I've ever seen in my life. And that, in a nutshell, was how I was how I was interacting with my wife. I was totally inauthentic with Penny. And what I mean when I say that is I was withholding.
Mm.
I was lying to Penny by omission consistently.
Mm.
And then
keeping secrets.
Say that again.
Keeping secrets. It's one of most men are lying by omission at some level, even if it's not over anything massive. Mm-hmm. It's over their emotional state, over their feelings, over their truth. I hear this all the time.
Yeah. And exactly. I had a coaching call yesterday with a friend of mine who is dealing with this very thing. He makes a good living. He's lived, he shifted his life from a path of self-destruction when he was quite young to one of productivity, which is wonderful. He has a beautiful family and he's caring for them, and he hates his job. And his dad set the path for him. His dad martyred his life and worked a job that he hated so that his kids could have the things that he thought they needed. And his dad's retired now. And you'd think that retirement was the golden ticket for that kind of living. Yeah. But the martyr lives on. his father continues to be a martyr of this job that he hated, and the kids, they honor him for having made this sacrifice, for being this martyr. And he's still stuck in that conversation. So when my client, my coaching client, went to his father and said, "Hey, I've got 2.5 years of savings saved up in the bank. I really want to go out on my own and do something that I want to do. What do you think?" His dad's like, "But what are you going to do when those 2.5 years are up?" And I mean, the job's the only, that man did what he thought he had to do, but he does not have culture. The culture has him.
And that's the model of productivity, isn't it? Is that model of we are products of our experience, our life, our education, our society, whatever, and we are productive. And so, as opposed to creative, because when I hear 2.5 years savings, what could you create in that time? Wow, that's like opportunity and possibility and greatness,
and adventure and excitement, and
yeah.
And but in a world where your value is the value that you produce and nothing else, not that you create, but that you produce.
Yes.
Which is an interesting distinction. Creating can be producing. Producing can be creating. But from this context, that's not an option, Yeah. So he's dealing with, and his wife is like, "I would really like some more of your time."
I'm going to roll you back to how you created Penny.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for bringing it back here.
And I'm going to, because I think this is a really valuable insight for people to maybe look at how their expectations are creating their disappointment in their relationships.
The secrets invariably create distance. And the distance has to be filled. And in my case, and I assert that in most men's cases who are keeping secrets from their wife or lying to their wife or whatever it is that they're doing that is not relating to reality, that is not relating to who their spouse actually is, or being interested in the discovery of who their spouse is at any given moment, that what they're filling that space with is BS. It is more stories, it is lies, it's projections, it's expectations. And the more we put that in between us, the wider the distance grows between my relating to Penny as this miraculous, creative, loving, gentle, kind soul who happens also to be utterly attractive, sexy as hell, to this thing that I sleep with and that I expect to handle the finances and expect to, provide food for the for the children. She's a thing. She might as well be an automaton, a robot. From that perspective. I'm sorry. What's the how deep can I go here before we get into trouble?
I don't know what YouTube has got to say about that, but I'm free and open.
If I relate to my wife as a sex doll that can also do finances and food and care for children.
A Swiss Army wife.
A Swiss Army wife. There we go. That's a much better Swiss Army wife. Yeah. I'm not relating to her as a person. I'm not relating to her as a possibility. I'm not relating to her as who she is, this artistic, creative master of expression who has.
And isn't that interesting that actually when you describe that image, that is the image that fits along with the $20 man. He's Ken and she's Barbie. It's that's what it looks like. That's what the illusion is. And when you speak about this distance that's growing, one of the things that men often say to me is how isolated they feel. And I can remember a story that somebody told me about how he gets home after a long day and he walks into his, he's got a beautiful house, nice car in the drive, kids, dog, and his wife and daughter are sitting on the sofa. And he said even the dog didn't look up, and he would walk in and go, oh, a spaceship landed on the roof of the building today. And they'd be like, oh, that's nice, darling. And he couldn't see how he had created that separation through the distancing, the not being open, and showing off himself.
Yeah. If my wife is a trophy, she's not a woman anymore, and she's not a possibility anymore. She fits on a shelf.
Yeah, there's no intimacy there.
Right. Yeah, what are you gonna do? Gonna go make love to a trophy? It's like, well, she's pretty,
Yeah.
But there's and here's the funny part. Then the default is then to blame them for not meeting my needs.
Yeah. And then you go somewhere else to Stacey in photocopying or whatever. And she suddenly said, oh, you're marvelous. And you feel seen again. And you feel vulnerable, and you tell all your secrets. And the closeness happens. And this is how marriages fall apart in this scenario. Whereas if a man can be vulnerable and intimate and share of himself with his chosen partner, she'll be all the things that Stacey in photocopying will be.
It is miraculous what can occur
when
there is closeness in a relationship. It is miraculous what difficulties can be overcome. It's miraculous what challenges can be met when it's not you and a stranger who happen to be married in the eyes of the law and the church, but when you and your dearest, closest ally one is the one that you can confide in completely, the one who knows your deep, dark secrets and loves you in spite of them, and can share with you their deep, dark secrets, and you love them in spite of their stuff, their smallnesses. They're on the path, on the spectrum of giantessness.
Yeah.
It is the possibility of aliveness in a relationship. And here's the funny thing, like, it's not once and done, right? After I met with Steve, there were times where I would start to withhold from Penny, and I had to go, I've committed to you that I would be transparent, and I am not being transparent. It's that cleanup thing that we were talking about before the call.
Yes. Yeah. How empowering that is to be able to just go and say, it's like this. I said that, I didn't mean it. Or I've thought again about it, and it doesn't feel good now, and it did before, and now it doesn't. But to be able to lay it out on the table and say, this is how it is. No need for apology. Cleaning up doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, if it isn't necessary that there needs to be an apology, then that should be part of the cleanup. But sometimes it is just an explanation of what's happened. Yeah.
And it loses the charge of. So in my family growing up, one of our favorite movies, and it's still one of my favorite movies, is The Sound of Music. And at one point, one of the nuns comes to the Reverend Mother and says, I have sinned, Reverend Mother. And they've stopped the Nazis from chasing the family von Trapp as they're fleeing to Switzerland. But in my family growing up, that was the preamble to any sort of cleanup. I have sinned, Reverend Mother. and we're talking about things that aren't sins. I didn't do well on a test, or I didn't complete my chores on time. I have sinned, Reverend Mother. Oh!
Empowers it as a as a cleanup session, it disempowers that. It becomes a lip service almost, doesn't it, to something that's actually very real when done authentically.
Yes. Yes. And it also makes it so it's so dang heavy that even to deal with something small feels like you're confessing to a major transgression. And that's hard to do. Whereas if you're saying, you know what, I made an error on our on our budget. We spent $5 extra. We're gonna have to, sorry about that, and move on. you know, and to be transparent in that way in a relationship allows for just growth and expansion. And if I may share with you what after this, so Penny had wanted to paint for 20 years. And I met her about 5 years into that desire to really paint. And she would buy paints and she'd watch painting shows and she would dream about it. And there was something keeping her from doing it. And after that Be With session with Steve, one day, she was already an excellent photographer in her own right. But one day I came home from work and I plopped down in front of the television and she just pulled out some paints and painted a picture. And at the end of this half-hour sitcom that I was watching, I went and looked at this thing that my wife had produced, and I was in utter astonishment.
Or created.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And she's continued to expand that. She teaches painting now.
Wow.
And she loves it. And it's a source of income. Like that's how she makes her pocket money, is teaching painting and sewing. And is that true? She also helps out with the finances at this point. So
so I would invite you to remove the word pocket money.
Yes.
That's how she creates
that. That's how she creates. That's how she creates and contributes to the household, and she does. It's something that is fun for her, and it has tangible. She's got money that she can, if we need it, she'll go put it in the bank, and if she doesn't need to do that, if we're doing okay, then she'll go spend it on more painting supplies or on something that she wants, something that brings her life. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And she's lovely. She's a very gentle, very soft character, I see. I don't know her well, but her manner, her tone, she comes across as an artist, a gentle soul.
Gentle soul, an artistic soul, a loving soul.
Mm.
That's who she is for me, is loving. I woke up about an hour before I had to wake up for this interview, before I had agreed to wake up. And I leaned over and I got to look at Penny, and my eyes it's dark in our room and just a little bit of light from the different electronics that we have plugged in. And I can see the outline of her face. And I'm astounded that after 25 years, I don't know who this person is. She gets to surprise me. She gets to create herself. And I get to love this being and be loved by this being who is kind and gentle and loving and peaceful and can be with anyone, has no immediate judgments about any person. And I'm like, oh, how did I get this lucky? And it's created.
And that been 25 years.
Yeah. This in 3 weeks we'll have been married for 25 years.
Wow. Wow, that's so beautiful.
It is.
And that's a relationship that's now currently built not on expectation. It's built on a creative model. That's lovely. Love that. Well done, both of you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, and it's, this commitment, this level of commitment is a level that one of the beautiful things from the culture that Penny and I come from is the context of our relationship is that it does not end here in this life. It's not till death do us part.
Right.
It is the possibility of that relationship enduring beyond the bounds of our conscious ability to even see, and Penny's commitment to me is so powerful and kind and self-full, and selfless. At the time it was selfless, but it's become so self-full. What I mean when I say that is that it's a win-win. It's a non-zero sum game. We both win. And I know that if I wanted to end the relationship, all I have to do is cheat on Penny and our relationship's over. We have that agreement. Now, I'm not going to do that, Fiona.
Mm.
I'm not going to do that because my commitment is I love her and she loves me, and that's who we are. Is committed to each other and in an aliveness and a creation that is. I mean, I look forward to the next 25 years.
And that's something that possibly, we live in a fairly disposable society. Cars don't last. My dad had one pair of shoes for years. He polished them religiously. Those shoes, they were rehealed and resoled and polished and rehealed and resoled, and they lasted. And it was like he had a commitment. He had same with his suit. There was commitment behind those. But we don't live in a world like that now, do we? We don't stay in the same job. We don't. Everything's almost got built-in obsolescence. Almost everything has built-in obsolescence, and I wonder how we've transported that to relationships. Of all my problems, and so I'll just get rid of this one, and I'll start again. I'll get a new one.
Yeah. Well, here's the beautiful part of that. You see, there's nothing wrong with that, Fiona. There's absolutely no problem with going through that until you discover that the common denominator is you.
There's a phrase that girls, I don't know if they do in the States, but certainly when I was young, it was like, same bloke, different trousers. There's a way of explaining, and it's like, it's not, it's the same you. It's not that you're attracting the same type of man. It's you're showing up as the same type of you.
Yeah.
Therefore, you will create the same type of relationship.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So
when it comes to identity now, given that you've stripped away the phoenix of the $20 million man, went to ashes, do you still have an identity, or is that not something that you relate to anymore as a being?
I have created an identity. I have created an identity, and Phoenix is a very good word for it because it didn't come from nothing, except those parts that I did create from nothing. You see, the agreements that I have are still valid. The religion that I grew up in is still the religion that I practice.
Right.
Now, I practice it with a hell of a lot more power, which is a funny thing to talk about religion with, but I am inspired by the possibility of community. I am inspired by that my contribution and my service can be felt all over the world in this container that is something that I have, that I have been a part of, and my family's been a part of for 5 generations. And I have no problem with anybody that does not appeal to, you know. So parts of those are still things. They're things that I have chosen, though. See, the distinction is the first time it was installed, inculcated, expected, and this time around, coming from the ashes of disaster, I got to pick and choose the pieces that I wanted, you know. So
this is the difference between your identity being created for you, you being created upon by others, and you choosing to create the identity that serves you.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So my identity now is those things that I've chosen, and how I create myself as being. I am a giant.
You are a giant indeed. You are a giant. And talking of giants, we've had Nick Smith, the author of Giants and Smalls, with us for the whole of the show today, which has been amazing. And my eyesight's not great, so I need glasses on. So I'm kind of looking, and I can almost read. And I'm on my laptop, not on my big screen here. So I haven't been able to read all of the comments, but I will read them all. And comment further as we go through. So as we wind up, I'm very conscious of time, and I'm just going to check where we are. Oh, we've got another 8 or 9 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
If you had one piece of advice or a recommendation for men who have really related to your story of who you were, and then looked at you and gone, wow, he's created an amazing relationship and a life that he loves, what would you say to them?
I would say the same thing that I said to my client yesterday, which is to take an hour or 2 or 3 to be by yourself with nothing other than a notepad and a pen. No electronics, no phone. You turn that thing off. You go somewhere where you will not be disturbed. You go somewhere sacred to you, or inspiring to you, if that word doesn't work. Someplace that you love, someplace that you can feel love for yourself. And connect to yourself. Connect to spirit, connect to God, connect to the giant in you. And from that connection, even if you can only look at it from like a desire to be a giant, it's still connecting to the giant in you wherever you are along that spectrum. And get clear on your needs and your soul's needs. The ones that you're aware of, the ones that are being met, the ones that aren't being met. You get clear on those needs. And allow to emerge in your writing the things that you will simply no longer put up with. Lack of adventure, lack of intimacy, lack of time with the people that really matter in your life, lack of respect for yourself. Was it the bard said, "To thine own self be true"?
Yeah.
This is an exercise of being true to yourself. This is an exercise of setting aside the pretentious SOB, the $20 million man, the martyr, I must give everything for my children so they can have what I didn't have. Whatever story it is that you have, set that aside and connect as deeply as you can with that. And then start creating the fulfillment of those needs. And be okay with, just with enormous grace for yourself. Be okay with failing, because you will.
With the understanding that it is not for the people around us to fulfill our needs. It's for us to
Yes.
fulfill our needs.
Yes.
It's a question I often bring up with my clients. We look at needs, and I start them with that same question, sit down and write down your needs. And I often get quite blank stares back, like, I don't really get, what do you mean by that,
Yeah.
or it's like, how many times a week? I mean, is that, and it's so pigeonholed into my needs. How much sex am I having? It's like, so I define it as the things that without them, you're not okay.
Yeah.
So one of my needs is, so my son is at university and he lives away. He's having a great time. He doesn't come home very often. But I need to talk to him once a week, at least. To know check in with him, know he's okay, just to connect with him and spend some time with him. I love him as a human being. I enjoy his company. I know that if I don't stay in touch with him, or he doesn't stay in touch with me, and then longer than a week goes by, I'm not okay. So right there's a need. I need to ensure that my communication with my son is always free and open, and we keep that flow going. So something like that can be a really important need. Yes, we can look at how much water to drink and what food to eat, and that's also relevant. I know that if I don't eat healthily, I can get away with it a couple of times a week, but if I'm not eating good food, I'm not okay. There comes a point where I'm just not okay. So I love to just put that in as a frame for needs, the things that without, you're not.
I love that. And thank you for drawing that distinction, because what I notice is that, and I'm going to update my coaching with that, because what I notice is that I have this expectation that simply by connecting to the divine before they write down their needs, that this is going to be, the output. But if you're stuck in this little box that all you can see is, I need 50 push-ups a day, I need to get off once or twice a week, then it's going to be difficult to see the real needs, the soul level needs.
It might come with a lot of aggression of, but that question, framing it in that way gets you down to those finer distinctions of, I need to go out with my mates. I need to go and have a boys' night out. And then I get them to define the need in quantity and how often. So you need to go and have a boys' night out. How often do you need to go, and how long for? Is it like a whole day? Is it a weekend away? Is it just a beer in the pub? What does it actually look like? And how often do you need to do that? And then it becomes something they can share with their families, and that each member of the family can do their own version of their needs. So they've all kind of got this little understanding that, when mum's in the bath, it's a do not disturb thing. So mum needs an hour once a week in the bath with candles, nobody disturbing.
That's right.
And everyone's like, that's cool. Yeah. We all know how to honor each other's needs, rather than us expecting the people around us to know what we need. If we don't know what we need, you can be damn sure they don't know what we need.
That's right. That's right. And then we're upset when our needs aren't met. And how dare you not read my mind correctly?
Exactly. And I didn't even know what you said in the first place.
That's right. Oh, I love it. Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful what you've said. And when we are enrolled in enrolled others and the close ones in our family and are around us in meeting our own needs, taking care of ourselves,
Mhm.
and being willing and ready to assist them, making sure their needs are met. That is a created life.
It is a created life. And on that, Dave, we've just gone over the hour. So I am going to say thank you so much for a really fascinating conversation. And I think a really useful conversation for people, especially guys, but ladies too. I'm sure they would pick up a lot for this. Isn't just about men. It's about people. It's about relationship. It's about living our best lives.
It is, and creating the life of our desires.
So, Dave, how could people get hold of you if they resonated with what you said and they think, this is a guy I'd love to have a conversation with?
Yeah. So my website is 5 Days to Own Your Life. That's the number 5. And then everything else is spelled out with no spaces, of course. 5 Days to Own Your Life.com. And there is just a little bit of information about me there. And to connect, there is a connect button that will show you my open times on my calendar and set everything up, and we'll have a call.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
And I will see you soon.
Sounds good.
In one of the places that we tend to be.
Thank you so much for your time. I love who you are being, Fiona.
Yeah, I love who you're being too, Dave.
Thank you.
And